Summary. This novelette is about a young boy who starts to struggle to deal with his closet uncle's passing. In doing so, he has developed an imaginary friend. Problems insist, however, over time, since the debut of Thus Friend, as he seems to change, become different emotionally, and at one time becomes violent. So, in a last stand effort, the boy's parents turn to the mother's oldest sister for help. From there, it's the reader's pleasure to find out what happens for the rest. Bonehead. He walked in slowly, the young boy with his gray ball cap hunkered down tight upon his head, holding onto his toys so tight to his chest. His Power Ranger t-shirt crinkled from the force he was clenching upon the hard plastic action figures, a last gift from his dear departed uncle. Symbolism at his finest, as the hard plastic figures were Army Reserve types, like his uncle, who was a proud military vet, a Vietnam War vet at that. But to this young boy, who was still understanding the huge fundamentals of what life truly was, still didn't perceive the concept of what death was, or understand the circumstances involving what war truly was, or the pain the survivors, such as his uncle, bring back with them. From a difficult time, a difficult circumstance, his mother and father walked in first, then himself to the living room of his aunts. His mother's sister, to be specific. He ran to the other side of the room with his action figures in tow, to the open vacancy that once housed the provider of the house as. His mom and dad did the standard meet and greet, a normal custom one would do, despite just leaving her residence a mere 2 days prior for the classified wake. I suppose the sister just had to stop by to check on her older sister. "Hey, Monica," the selective greeting from the younger sister and her husband. Monica, the window, stood up upright immediately and embraced them with both arms opened, smiling, which provided a good sign. "Hey, Carol, Frank, how are you guys doing, huh? On this bright and sunny day." Monica, the proud Christian woman that never missed a Sunday, as far as the young boys was concerned, as he was in the midst of watching and playing with his toys, that at the moment that was in the heat of battle, Monica held her composure as she listened respectively as the young boy's mother and father responded back the same, not even trying to dwell on the opened air that was now in her home, that she has been inhaling for almost a full 48 hours to the moment. It must have been fate, in a small sense, that she and her dearly departed had met in the service. As he was dead, heat in battle, Monica met her husband in the hospital ward. The rest was history. Carol, however, loved to relive it, for her and Frank's lovely legacy of meeting through a common mistake at the local grocery store. Frank, in his wisdom, just always loved to hear the constant tale of Lucky suffering from fatal wounds from a landmine incident, and Monica, who at the time was the tending nurse of the majority of the tent, started to tend him. And welp yes, in Carol's words, as she would end it on such a high note. As a lot would say, the rest is self-explanatory. So, even without her Lucky not being there anymore, Aunt Monica was a proud, strong woman, a former military nurse. The conversation was cut short, as Aunt Monica focused her attention to the loud, self-made fireworks expelled from the young boy's lips, as his plastic warriors were firing at enemies surrounding them at the moment. Pew, pew, the best gun noises the young gray-capped boy could make, oddly familiar to Star Trek weaponry than actual gunplay. Aunt Monica quickly almost lunged to her young nephew's level, as a adolescent smile became plastered all over her face, as in normal fashion, to her greeting with him, she planted a huge, wet one on the side of his right cheek, smearing some red lipstick. The young nephew of hers laughed hysterically as he reached and started to wipe off her marker. This then gave her time to extend her own arms again, to wrap around her nephew and embrace him like a boa constrictor. His ball cap, knocked off balance but still on, and crooked. His glasses crushed like the majority of his young face, including his favorite piece, his nose, that inhaled the thickened smell of smoke, perfume, and peppermint, Aunt Monica's standard scent. He welcomed it like a security blanket. She released him immediately after her young sister Carol protested her eldest sister with chuckles and jokes. She obeyed as the young boy sat back and was now smiling ear to ear, gazing up at Aunt Monica, who ascended to her feet once again with that gorgeous smile of hers. "So, Jake the Snake, what's going on, dude?" Nothing, Aunt Money." A touching nickname exchange between aunt and nephew. Jake the Gray Cap, Aunt Money, Monica. "Yeah? I see you got Uncle Lucky's figures with you?" "Yep." The happy gray-capped Jake smiled with glee as he snatched them back up from the white carpet crash landing. They did at his young feet, as Aunt Monica came in as intense as she was. He quickly, like a proud parent would do, showcased them to her, as though she herself didn't see them before. "See? Oh yeah, Jake the Snake, look at them, whoa. Hey, do you want some lemonade? Pink lemonade." Aunt Monica threw down a gauntlet for a good time for the young boy, a technique unaware to the young man that she used to ploy kids out of the room for the adults to speak about something important. Jake smiled energetically as he screamed loudly, "Yeah." "Okay. Well, downstairs, Roland has his old Sega out with Street Fighter and stuff as well. Go on. He's down there waiting for you with a spare controller, and ice-cold pink lemonade in the cans waiting." Young Jake looked at Frank and Carol for permission. They both smiled and acknowledged him to go have fun and be prepared to leave when they call. Jake agreed and took off like a bat out of hell, disappearing into the far distance, leaving his two action figures in the same place as he was, leaving the adults in the room once more, loosing their smiles, the facades, and the positive views, as all three were still grieving for the select loss of one lucky Basil, Uncle Lucky for some, to little Jake, who disappeared to join his older cousin downstairs in the lair of a basement. Uncle Lucky was his bonehead, who always wanted to give a piece of himself to Jake in a friendly, combative way since Jake was born. The entire story of their relationship forged over the nickname given to him from Jake on a fateful night of watching old-school wrestling tapes. Thus, his namesake of Jake the Snake. That particular wrestler was always his favorite, but as little Gray Cap smiling, Jake descended the steps to meet up with 20-year-old Roland, who was stopping in from college to visit his mother, now currently reliving some childhood memories of his own, perhaps that of peace and tranquility amidst this difficult time. Upstairs, the quiet tears was shed, and the quiet support conjured between the three of them about Lucky and his troubled life, and how he found God and Solstice. The more important topic, however, that was, though brought up, was that of Jake. Apparently, Jake has had more difficulty adjusting to the loss than anyone had come to realize, as Carol and Frank regaled their family of the recent incidents that has gotten them confused and concerned. Carol spoke the troubling line first. "Monica, Frank and I believe that Jake has developed some sort of a mental lapse of some kind. Wow, really? He seemed fine to me. What's wrong with him? Monica's question made Carol turn to Frank, who spoke as softly as his wife just did. Well, Monica, over time here since Lucky had passed, we have noticed Jake has developed a imaginary friend. The lovable Aunt Monica was taken back a tad as she reasonably asked the reasonable thing. Really? Ha ha, why do you say that? What has really given you this intense perception of Jake having an imaginary friend? Frank the father looked back to Carol the wife, to tag in to assume the lead again. In a logical state of mind, it was a tag team personality, as Carol looked embarrassed to key her older sister in on the last few weeks of the behind-the-scenes look at the Crate household. The text being, Jake Crate. Well, sister, this started when we found out of the close proximity of Lucky's soon-to-be passing, from the derived sickness you had told us, and the rest of the family, for some time. Remember? Monica simply nodded as her reply to her sister. Carol continued onward. Well, on that particular week, we noticed one night after Frank tucked him in, we both silently had to walk by his room to get to ours, right? Well, please tell me how a young boy, such as he was, conversating with someone in the pitch black? No clue, perhaps he was just thinking out loud? You know how a lot of young kids just like to talk? Monica's semi-involvement with the health industry was showing through. Or was it when Carol looked at her sister questionably as she immediately answered back, Monica, he is going to be in the 3rd grade here. Frank and I just assumed naturally that the stages of such adolescence would start to fade a bit. I mean, we don't mind the annual tuck-in, as we figured this year would be the last of that. But we just got really concerned here. Monica's first look of stress surfaced. She began to showcase a frown. As in normal circumstances, Monica Basil put her medic thinking cap on. Suddenly, a lightning bolt must have struck her brain, as her eyes widened, and she blurted out, Has the bullying stopped? A tall tale sign in any case, I am sure, for a troubled young mind. Being bullied puts unwanted stress on a mind such as Jake Crate's, who was shifting through the fundamentals of what death truly was. Monica had brought it up, as it was an anthology of bad times that her sister and Frank had to go through. That could be a factor of this sudden emergence of their newer concern. Frank stepped back in. Far as we know, and I personally know what you are referring to, since I had to go into the school once or twice. That kid who was picking on my son was huge. I think his name was Max Grass. Yeah. Has it stopped, Frank? Monica asked again, concerned-like. Frank nodded in approval and said, Yeah, it had to. If not, I was going to sue the Grass family into the ground. Carol smiled with glee after that. So did Monica. Monica felt a sigh of relief as she continued onward. Okay? What else has been going on? From the conversation? Welp, it's only intensified. And then some, as Frank and I have noticed. He has started to talk to opened spaces in public and the backyard when he's swinging on his swing. Monica looked at her sister with wide eyes as she repeated what her sister had said now, from the very beginning. So, the dark conversation then fell into the many, many conversations with opened spaces. Right in front of you? Yes, both parents said in sync. Okay, Monica said, in a deep sigh that followed up by a flurry of rapid responses due to her medical profession. Both Frank and Carol tried to keep up with her explanations, but, sadly, their IQs together couldn't match up to hers. Carol snapped from the aggravation, as from the mere explanation alone, from her sister felt like herself and her husband was just imagining things due to the unforeseen circumstance of Lucky Basil passing. Listen, sis, I know. You know Monica, do you? Frank smiled in embarrassment as he reached over to his wife to restrain her and bring her close from the outburst. Monica tried to apologize for any misconception within her communication as she tried to extend her arms. However, Frank put his hands up. She obeyed. As the minor whispering started to happen, Monica looked defeated. She knew she had overstepped a bit. Frank, however, after he paused on the whispering and soothed the offended wife, he looked back over to Monica and continued upon the idea that his wife was trying to make. What your sister Monica was trying to say was, she completely understands your view on the matter, your logic and such. Thus why we came here today. We have kind of ran out of options that we can financially do. In full transparency, these moments have only intensified after Lucky died. Intensified? How? Monica said in a low, calm voice. Frank smiled as he then whispered over to Carol's ear, who smiled, gazing over at her sister then, rose up from her seat and walked out of the room. This puzzled Monica as she looked on, trying to understand the severity of the depth of the conversation she sparked. She went back outside the front door, more than likely to make a call, or perhaps just get some air. Now, one-on-one, no longer a tag team mentality. Frank Crate sat still on the corner piece of the couch, of wherein he and his wife sat, opposite of his sister-in-law Monica, as a certain tone was focused now within the large room around them. Monica, with her hands folded in front of her, awaited to hear from Frank's more scary visuals into her nephew's incidents. Well, the very day, Monica, that we left Lucky's side, and Jake said his final goodbyes, Carol and I took him out to go get some ice cream and Spot's that beautiful blizzard place out on 59. We both figured that ice cream would be an excellent remedy for any young kid to handle what was coming. Plus, it had that awesome little putt-putt place out back. So, we went, as I said, got our normal, usual, your sister and I. But something there was off. Jake ordered a peanut butter and chocolate explosion blizzard. Monica was enjoying the story a bit much until that mere detail didn't fully raise an alarm, but it made her focus just a tad bit, as Frank stared at her reaction, nodding slowly in her comprehension. Lucky loved the peanut butter and chocolate explosion, blizzards from Spots, on the occasions he would go, and yes, it did happen that he would take baby Jake when he did go. Jake was always fond of the hot fudge sundaes, Frank continued. We didn't care though, you see, we didn't. We just figured it was him to being closer to Lucky in spirit, you know. But little did we know how close he really wanted to be. After our ice cream, we went on the 12 holes of mini golf. We were having fun, laughing, and being hysterical, the bare normal, for us three. We, however, got to the last hole when there was high stakes involved. With the trick hole, Carol and I didn't notice it, but the grass kid was in front of us with a few of his buddies. The bully of Jake's, Monica's eyes and mouth met in the middle of one solid expression as silence crept back into the mix, as mentally Frank illustrated the entire environment. The looks exchanged, the stress, the crying, and the standoff in a sense, and lastly, the embarrassment from Jake's end, as it was possible that Frank and Carol tried to walk off the course to avoid confrontation. Monica was filled with horrid anticipation of what she was about to hear. She still begged for Frank to fill in her curiosity. So, What happened next, Frank? Simple Monica. Jake hospitalized the 3 teenagers. Right in front of us. Frank stammered a bit, getting that line out of his lips. It brought a traumatized feeling to the surface. Monica sat stunned, analyzing his body language, all of which seemed to prove how truthful he really was. As Frank Crate himself was a pretty solid guy. Roughly 5'8", a solid 250 lbs, red hair, and a slightly darker shade of red for a goatee. He was menacing on his bad days. How could a young boy in 3rd grade be all to beat up 3 grown teenagers in front of him? How? Frank, didn't you and my sister try to stop him? The front door opens and slams again, allowing Carol to make her entrance uncool. As she lifts her left leg up and slams it down hard on the coffee table next to her sister. She quickly then, before Frank had the chance to answer, lifted her pant leg up to show the deep and dark purpled bruising. We tried, doctor, we tried. As then, Frank lifted up his shirt, just a tad to show off his war wounds. Dark and darker shades of purple around Frank's ribs and waist. You don't even want to imagine below my waist, he said in a snarky comment, as his wife gave him that look of disgust, of referencing that to her sister. Monica looked down and around, as Frank concluded that particular incident with a damage report. The kids in front of us received one of their eyes being ripped out due to the blunt, forced trauma of the bloodied kid putter that Jake had, using it like a scythe of sorts, not to mention a severe concussion, a case of a fractured skull, several broken ribs, and 1 leg. But here's the kicker, what disturbs me. All the while as me and Carol, with a few others, had tried to disarm him, he got that grass kid again and clapped him right in the Adam's apple. Jesus! Monica blurted out in shock, hearing about Jake the Snake's sudden brutality. Clapping wasn't a form of excitement or honor in this situation. It was Frank's explanation into the severity that was brought down upon that blow from his own son. Yep, they had to poke a hole in that kid's neck, there and there, for him to even be transported to the hospital. Yeah, into his windpipes, correct? Yeah. Monica and Carol exchanging the more gruesome news of the tragic fate of the old bully of Jake's, allowing more of their tragic reality to sink in, as Monica herself relapsed as she brought up the question of calling Carol before the news broke about Lucky. So, that explains why you couldn't share that recipe with me yet. Busy. Yep, Carol said in a stressful smile, to reply to her sister. A steady thing of understanding the bigger picture, I am sure now. So was the cops involved, I'm sure. What had happened? Monica's reasonable mind came back into play. Frank and Carol both were in the midst of about to tell her more, when Jake came running back into the room, smiling and laughing, full of joy. All 3 adults placed their fun masks back on to welcome back in. Jake playfully tackled Carol. She returned the favor with a submission style of hug and a big whooping kiss on his cheek. What are you doing, Bubba? Nothing, Mom. Just coming back up here to get my guys. Bonehead reminded me to get them. He said they're good luck charms against Roland downstairs. He cheats a lot. Oh, okay, she said, a worried tone as she released her hold, staring at her sister as Jake disappeared from sight. Bonehead? Is that what Lucky used to always call him when they used to wrestle a lot? Monica was starting to connect the dots. Frank and Carol started to readjust themselves as young Jake left the room again. A silent self-praise came over Monica as she too watched as the boy left back to downstairs. Monica turned back slowly and totally dominated with the full frontal of her medical prowess upon the boy's troubled parents. Okay, that boy has some problems that he might have to talk to someone about. That's what we are saying to you, sister. We brought him over 'cause we really think that Jake had made bonehead after the image of Lucky. Silence was felt with all three of the adults after the revelation was spoken. After the long moment of silence between them, Frank finally spoke up into answering the earlier question that Monica made in reference from the actual police involvement in their predicament at Spot's putt-putt course. They told us, Mon, that it was him acting out. The violence almost had him charged, though, as well as us in return. But all what they made us pay was a bill from the damaged environment of Spots. That was all. Monica was shocked, but not entirely, as that was the state of play for the law enforcement nowadays. A thin blue line. But Monica refocused her energy back to her now troubled nephew. Okay, go figure. But to the topic at hand, what are you guys really doing about Jake? We don't know, Monica. We just figured to come back here, simply because, after more closely watching Jake since Spots, he seems more calmer around you, or your house, or more importantly, he doesn't go far without those two action figures. Monica simply nodded in those regards. As from Carol and Frank's side of things, it was a culmination of things, as from Spot's Jake's behavior had only worsened, as from the numerous reports from school to acting quite weird at home. The family dog spooked to be near him, when before Oscar, the family dachshund, wouldn't leave Jake's side, all within the quickened span of 2 weeks, involving the passing of his best friend, the other person he trusted in life. Monica sensed in the Jedi force of things what Frank and Carol Crate was about to ask her, and she was divided on it, for she too was working through her own grieving process, not to fairly mention being the listening ear to her own children about their deceased father, one of which, Roland, who was still in the basement keeping the young Jake busy, was the prime candidate for such means. Nevertheless, emotionally, Monica Basil was defiantly stretched to her limit. Both parties, now divided at this underpass of their word usage, separated by two different reasonings of what was to be a controversial topic. Something had to give. Carol graciously looked at her older sister and began to spill the words that had to be spoken. Sis, ever since we were little, you always had consideration for me. No matter the time, no matter how embarrassing, you always had, compared to everyone else. I remember that. And so, as I got older here, and had my own family, as you did yours, I always have gone out of my way to host holidays, pay for out-of-town vacations, to lastly, even if we are gallivanting, and you simply want to pay for something, I allow you to only pay for a mere 5% of what your half would be. Carol, you're kind of being dramatic. Monica's stale emotional state in her reply only fueled the ask from her sister that much more. Okay, that might be okay, but I have to be when it comes to my son, my only son, and we have already exhausted our mere resources to this supernatural phenomenon, and now before we press our red button, we ask you, and you alone too. She paused for a moment as she looked down in defeat at her husband Frank, who was holding her hand in support. Monica sat still, with slow tears of stress streamed down her face from the crazy situation. We would like him to spend the night here for a night or two, and just observe him, see if he can be reached. So you're pawning him off on me and Roland? As well the rest of my children. Really? Monica looked offended and helpless at the same time, as she didn't know how to react to such ask in a positive way Not because she personally doesn't want to, or didn't have the clear answer. She was still so hurt from the loss. Monica, it's not pawning. As you said, okay? We just need help. Okay? This is serious. Our red button is we lock him up against his will at Dorman Psychiatric Center Sanitarium. We don't want that, Carol booms. Monica now stands up on her feet to calm her sister, but not before two bodies appear at the far end of the room. Roland and Jake, who stood still, stunned. The three adults looked over in embarrassment and silent, reading the young men's body language. The older Roland smirked in awkwardness as he gently guided Jake to the door while looking at his mom, understanding the depth of the conversation they both had heard about. Jake holding back tears and fear as he gripped tighter to the action figures of Lucky Basil. Come on, Snake. Let's go to that arcade. At Mayans, my treat, Roland and Jake went through the stunned crowd of their respective adults. Carol and Frank looked down in their own respective disgust from the mere realization of now Jake knows what's going on. They both left calmly and out the door, shutting with a loud nag, making Carol and Monica jump with fright. No time that was wasted as he saw his wife now empty of motivation. Frank stood up now, overcoming his own embarrassment, and he finally laid down a rude boom as he forced the ideal down Monica's throat. Monica, listen, we don't want that. Neither do you, and I am sure neither would Lucky if he was still here. We are desperate. We need your med school knowledge. That we know covered the mind a quite bit. Please help us get a night's sleep. Frank boomed himself as he ascended with his wife Carol in hand. With tears streaming down her face, Monica sat still stunned as she simply watched them walk out the door quickly. She watched as they got back into their vehicle dramatically and leave. When her driveway was clear once more, without Roland's, or now Carol and Frank's car, she walked out on her porch to survey the evening sky and the quiet neighborhood around her, and to sadly discover Jake's red book bag stuffed with 2 days' worth of clothes and other misc, things such as his favorite movies, proud DVDs, a proud goldmine of the time. Monica got disgusted, full of sorrow at the treatment of young Jake Crate, as she walked back into the house and swiftly back into the spare bedroom. She looked around to inspect it swiftly, as the room was decorated patriotically, as the bedspread was white, pillows red as is the bedsheet underneath. The flooring of the room was wooden with slates. The painting of the room was a navy royal blue, with various warrior-inspired paintings all around the room, stopping at the great big wooden mirror, dead set in front of the large bed. Aunt Monica called it Lucky's room, as Lucky Basil himself in life was such a beautiful patriot for his country. She painted this room and decorated this herself with Carol and Roland's help to commemorate his fight he had, as well as to remember him. In fact, that very mirror was from their storage department. Roland and Frank fetched it for Monica. It was Lucky's childhood mirror from his house, the very mirror from his bedroom, growing up. He considered it to be an heirloom to pass along to his children, to the day he would meet his grandchildren. Sadly, that wasn't to be the case. As she was reminded of such a tragic memory, she threw Jake's 2-day overnight bag upon the bed. It ricocheted with a slight rumble from the bed springs. The noise within the house was more quiet from this room, as her scuffles from her bare feet seemed louder after the bag stopped its motion. She looked around happy, then sad. The feeling of proud came along as well. But it was momentary. It was only due to the fact of her own creation of the room itself, as though she was walking into a monument of some kind, or emotional vault at the time, a time and place where she placed a lot of her woes that she had to endure. Monica never really was the type to endure. She finally sat upon the bedside of the bed, as she herself was stuck in a grieving memory of her late husband, who sadly passed away in their own bedroom on the complete opposite side of the doorway of Lucky's room. Down the narrow hallway, she started to cry by herself, as with all of the talks involving Jake and Lucky made her recount the very last holiday the entire family met, the last holiday he had to enjoy, Easter. She looked ahead and painted the scene once more, herself at the dinner table. On the opposite side, her and Lucky's only daughter, Diane, Roland and Frank in the way back, shooting the breeze about the Steelers and the Browns. Intense rivalry surrounded by all the food. In the living room of wherein the kitchen and dining room was connected, lied Carol, Arnold, Lucky's and Monica's oldest son, as well as little Jake playing with his toys with Uncle Lucky, who was strapped to his very chair, his oxygen tubes through his nostrils, as well as many ivies running in and out of his arms. Monica looked back on the memory as she remembered the true highlight of the whole get-together, besides the meaning of the actual holiday. She remembered in between of treating him with his armada of medicines and running him food options. She remembered the serious care and how time seemed to stop around he and Jake as the two were giggling and arm wrestling and whispering funny jokes to each other. They both seemed to not care of the present reality, Jake being young and dealing with life and school, with the intense ramifications of the bullying he endured, and Lucky's meeting his end to his story with class and brass. He didn't allow the tubes of his longevity to stop him from the honest eyes of his nephew. Monica remembered that, as she remembered the next bit, as Lucky had a coughing jag that followed through a intense convulsion. That had everybody on edge. Jake went flying into Arnold's arms, looking on. Lucky never looked away from Jake, as Monica and Diane both stabilized him. It shook the family up something awful for weeks. Suddenly, from behind her, a huge gust of wind shot up her spine that brought her out of the memory. She got startled and stood up and looked back at the door, way of whence it came. Nothing was there for her to see. She looked around again for any possible reason. No opened windows, no vents or air conditioning on. Nothing. A small fear came to the surface, but that was momentary as she remembered to fall back in line with her nightly routine, except for some spice now, since Jake was staying with her for 2 days, as that was the natural story for Monica Basil as she entered into the homemaker life, always filled with schedules, pillars, and posts. Monica made her way back into the kitchen portion of the night as she assumed the natural dinner selection. She went through the normal kitchen drawer first, the drawer that had all the knives and such, as she remembered the meal she had selected for her. And Roland was a mere seafood dish, crab and chicken Alfredo, a beautiful merger of Italian and sea life, in a retrospect. But now since Jake was joining there, party Monica did and Audible and provided the customary go-to, being just a plain spaghetti and meatball dish, as it was normal when someone is alone in their house, and there really isn't any other normal living thing in there with them. Sounds travel and bounce off other solid surfaces. It's common science, I believe. The cracks and faint whirling of electronic devices like the refrigerator, are just sounds to a lonely homeowner, too accustomed, too normal. As Monica was cooking and visualizing, concentrating upon every ingredient, living in the normal, despite the troubling news that literally landed in her lap, something that remained to linger, something that her mind wouldn't allow her to forget. As for a moment of a brief thought, she looked up, staring ahead into the blank space, reimagining the name droppage of Jake's imaginary friend, Bonehead. Many thoughts ransacked through her mind, both professionally and personally. A moment later, a sudden light bulb clicked in her head, as pertaining to her nephew. She didn't blurt out the answer she received, as it was no point. She tucked it back in and went back to cooking. An hour later, Roland and Jake arrive back at home base. Roland walks in side by side, with little Jake cackling and laughing like some old witches, as if Monica had to deal with two 8-year-old little boys instead of one. She smiled herself. As Roland and Jake turned the corner, the dialogue of their adventure at Mayans started to paint the picture. For Monica, who was leaned over her kitchen counter, listening for every word, "Boy, check that was killer, man. How you did the hat trick challenge. Down there got us a free lunch. And a picture upon their wall of Champs, baby." Roland boomed with excitement as he then high-fived his little cousin, who cackled and was feeding off his shared joyful reaction. "Thanks, Roll Man." "Roll Man," Aunt Monica joked, playing into the joyful emotion of the two boys. They both laughed with her as well. Roland then looked over to the pot of spaghetti and meatballs. He instantly became sour with his mom as he griped, "Hey Mom, what about that crab and Alfredo dish? That was supposed to be on the menu tonight." "Yeah, I know. Like I know also, your cousin here doesn't have a clear response to seafood, like you and I. So we have to do a substitute." "Sub?" Roland started to get a little heated, showing off a milder side of his younger days, preferably around the same age as Jake. Monica looked at her older child with a stern look of demanding obedience. Roland started by his own outburst, looked at the silent Jake, and then back at his mom, and understood his mistake, as he then asked kindly to be excused. Then, from dinner, as his taste buds wouldn't find solace in this meal. Monica nodded, and Jake nodded as well, adding insult to injury. Roland smiled and gave a friendly nod of appreciation to them both as he walked forward and kissed his mom on her head once more and high-fived Jake. Still having his keys, brought them back out of his pocket. "Well, I will be back later. I will go grab a bite real fast. Okay? Enjoy. Love you. Love you." The fated last message from Roland before the front door slammed again. Monica was used to Roland coming in and out, as that was his rebel-style nature that now started to mellow out. It takes a lot of gutful wind out of one's sails when a parent dies, Monica notices, just like the differences in Diane and Arnold as well. Everyone's still grieving. Everyone is still mourning. Emotions are being shown to try and vindicate their father's, in Monica's case, husband's death. They all knew it was coming, for it was coming for some time. Perhaps what haunts the remaining few is their last few actions around their selective member, and the non-responsive attitude they displayed. A horrible thought to consider indeed. No one knows. So, for the moment, it is still considered grieving. As Monica accepted Roland's personal way of dealing, living, as well as breathing, life was driving. Monica and Jake was left all alone. Finally, Jake smirked a bit as he started to play with those two tucked figures. "Hey, Snake, why don't you was up for supper, okay?" 'Cause I got some news to tell you. I know Aunt Money. I am spending the night, right? Jake looked aggravated at the pandering his aunt was giving him. Monica simply chuckled once and replied, Yes, yes, so true lucky you. Yeah, I know, Aunt Money. I knew in me, my mom and dad were coming over here what was happening. How? Bonehead. Ah, yes, the fabled new best friend to my growing nephew of the 3rd grade. Bonehead. The conversation was starting to resemble a lot of the same topics discussed earlier from Jake's parents. Monica could be internally starting to search for answers of why Jake had made Bonehead the typical request from her sibling and husband. Yeah, Jake responded under his breath with a playful smile. Yeah, can you tell me about Bonehead? Can I see him? Can he see me? What does he look like? Monica laid it out thick of her first investigational question to the young 8-year-old. Thank God she didn't make it obvious for the young kid. She was doing her parental thing and retrieving the plates from her cabinet as her convo was still commencing. She wasn't expecting the next bit from Jake at all, as he answered her right back in a similar fashion, not making it obvious, a full spectrum out of his vocabulary. Well, Aunt Money, he see everything. He see you now, as he see Roland, Arnold, Diane and my mom and dad. He wishes you can see him, Aunt Money. He tell me all the time he wishes you could see him. But he said you can't. Why not? Monica asked curiously, from the kitchen as Jake had gone away to the local bathroom to obey his aunt from the earlier request. He walks back in smiling, now sitting down at the dinner table, looking at his aunt with a kind demeanor, hands washed and folded, and in front of him cuffed, answering Monica slowly. He said of what he looks like, and of breaking rules he shouldn't have broken. Now he's paying it back. And boy, oh boy, Aunt Money, will he ever from his helmet, and guns, and a big knife he carries, it's weird. Why is that Jake? I don't know why a monster would need those. Monica stood in place and studied her nephew's body structure, his tone in response. She was totally observing him in that mere moment. She thought about a lot of what he said, listened to his explanation. She thought about a lot until that light bulb she hid away popped back in there from its storage place. She was afraid to ask it, for the light bulb was in resemblance of a rude question, a blunt question, in full transparency that could cause a reaction she doesn't want to occur. She proceeded anyway and dropped it. Jake, are you saying that you see, dear Uncle Lucky? The young boy looked at his aunt with the most tremendous fright, as though his hand was caught in the cookie jar. He didn't say nothing at first, as he just looked around, as though he was searching for something, or in this case, someone. He was starting to become slowly petrified. Monica looked on with concern as she tried to ask, "What's wrong, Jake?" When Jake gave her the universal sign of shh, Monica, taken back by the exchange, obeyed her young nephew. As from her standpoint, she noticed his eyes catching a wide-open space nearest her love seat in the living room. He wouldn't take his eyes off of there. He started to nod slowly, then again, in a rapid approval. No, don't do that, please. Aunt Money is perfect. I know. No, I know. Bonehead. Please, I know, and I am sorry. Bonehead. Bone! Jake said in a frightful yell, as now he seemed to follow the space back out into the evening darkness that blanketed the front door and hallway area next to the bedrooms. Monica followed onward as well, scared and confused, until a loud bang in the darkness of the distant wall made her jump. It wasn't the typical noise that was too common. It was something of a physical touch, something that a crackle of a closed fist off of drywall would make. Bone, please come back. Jake was brought to the edge of tears, as he then looked to the ground and allowed them to flow, unable to restrain them from the situation at hand. He was alone. He was hurt. His only best friend that he has ever had just left. Monica still stood quietly staring at her nephew, trying to find the suitable words of comfort to give, as she was floating in the middle scheme of things. One side, realizing what she did wrong, calling out the problem at its source too early, making her nephew confront the reality that the rest of the family have to face. The other, being that she just killed off the only friend, the only comfort that Jake really had, as due to the bullying of the past from that Max Grass kid that he demolished. Jake the Snake was still young. It was okay in a lot of cases for kids that young still to still have a overactive imagination. Monica Basil was caught dead in the middle of those quite elaborate reasons. She tried to tread lightly. "Hey, Snake, are you okay? Honey?" Jake didn't answer, as he simply just stood up staring at his Aunt Money for a brief moment as tears were still rolling, his bottom lip quivering every second. He runs away immediately to Lucky's room and slams the door, flinging himself upon the bed on the inside, crying aloud deep within the bed sheets of the patriotic room. Monica's regret flooded her system like the common flu, as she sat down immediately at her dining room table, at her retrospect spot she always sat at, even when her husband Lucky was alive. Monica was a big shtick for the schedules, even in her moments from day to day, as if her life was organized to one solid job. Her hands were folded over top of her face as she contemplated what she was going to do next. Looking at the hot meal she made especially for Jake, she looked around to the table with the utensils placed and thought of the potential use of a funny dinner shared between herself and her nephew, all dashed due to her line of questioning, all instructed by her sister and her husband. She looked down over to the slammed bedroom door, to the still crying Jake. She could hear him in his muffled state through a thick wall, and the material that was pressed up against his face containing the emotional fury he was unleashing. Monica praised her purchase of the deluxe coin vent store, of which that comforter and the sheets were from. She stood up and made herself a plate. Then Jake, as she then tried a different approach, the more of the Monica way. She walked slowly over to the door of Lucky's room and lightly tapped on the door like so. "Hey, Snake, can I come in?" "No." His boomed-filled dialogue made Monica feel worse. She knocked again with the same lighter tone she just had. "Come on, Jakey. I made you a plate of the spaghetti, and it's still warm. Come on out. You have to be hungry." "No, I'm not, Roll Man. And I ate at Mayans. We had Moz sticks, and they were awesome." Monica hid her slight chuckle at the young man's witty comeback, as she mutters under her breath, "Moz sticks, huh? Okay, Jake. Well, I am sorry if I upset you in any way that wasn't my intention. I just wanted to get to know about who Bonehead truly was. That's all. I mean, can an awesome aunt look out for her nephew? You can Aunt Money. That wasn't the point. You called him Uncle Lucky. He's not Uncle Lucky. Uncle Lucky's in heaven. Bonehead knows that. Okay?" Monica said to the still emotional nephew of hers through the closed door. "So, if he wants me to see him, and all of that, he must be friendly. What's his gripe with me calling him then Uncle Lucky?" The boy goes silent once more. No sound. No sign of movement. She could hear from the bed. She instantly became concerned as she boomed herself. "Jake! Jake! You okay? Talk to Aunt Money. She started to tear up from fear as she then started to attempt to break down the door. She stood back and charged at it, feeling the inner structure of the door loosening from the wall itself after every impact. She enough, though, to her disliking. Jake opened the door slowly, with dried tears standing calmly, looking up at his aunt, answering that last door question with this lengthy reply. 'Cause he never liked Uncle Lucky. He never liked what he stood for, nor liked the way he carried himself to him and his unit. But he did respect him, since he served with him in all, Jake said, as he simply started to walk away back to the dinner table. Monica followed, intrigued by the change of the unforeseen events here. She continued to allow it to play on. How did Bone head serve with Uncle Lucky? 'Cause he was Uncle Lucky's friend at one time as well. Aunt Money? Really? He never mentioned him to me before. He wouldn't. Aunt Money? Bone told me Uncle Lucky was indeed tough as a kid as he was an adult. Ah, interesting. So he's been around this entire time? Monica asked. As now her nephew took a huge bite out of one of her one-of-a-kind meatballs. He looked back as he was chewing, explaining the origin story of Bonehead. He tried to tell me of a dark world he is from, a place of coldness and a lot of water. He doesn't know how or why, but he did say there was other people there as well. He just couldn't see them, only hear. He gave me a headache. Then he said out of the blue one day, he was here for Uncle Larry, for all of those years when he was a little boy, made up in the army style of clothes, guns, helmet and knife, filled with a sense of focus and love and protection. He said he felt like he was Lucky's guardian angel. Jake fully now swallows the meaty morsels and goes back for more in a true carnivore fashion. Aunt Monica, now fully seated back down on her end, listened more intrigued of the intense imagination of this story she was hearing. A big piece of her feels the reality stemming from this story, the sense of realism within the fiction. It sunk in her curiosity more, blocking out Carol and Frank Crate, who was at home currently, pacing in select rooms, drinking and awaiting a phone call from Monica. Monica still begged the young storyteller to continue onward with Bonehead. Go on telling me about his world. Snake, it's dark, cold, wet, a lot of water, and he heard voices? Yep, that's what he told me. He said he wasn't aware of much more. He doesn't know the name of it. He just remembered being there, which could explain why he doesn't want to go back there, Jake said, as he chomped down hard this time, as the sound of the squishy noodles and meaty substance rang out loud within the confines of the dining room. Monica took a huge gulp in of worry, as do anyone to hear about a prison that housed this entity, a prison that painted a scary place to dwell. Then to hear the identity and the visual description of this character, then adding up the violence that Jake did with all of the other various stems of incidents, Monica finally derived at her prognosis as she listened back in from all of her thinking upon the topic. He said that if I keep believing in him, as well as wanting him, he can stay. And Aunt Money, I like him to stay. You would? A scary monster, such as he. Does he scare you? No. Monica, surprised by this notion of how much he seems to care for this imaginary monster. She just simply had to ask the reasonable thing. Why? She asked. Well, I got to school with monsters. I hear Mom and Dad talk about monsters. Wouldn't it be nice if you would have a monster as a best friend? Monica stood shocked for a moment as little Jake finished up his dish and he simply then took it over to the sink to rinse it off and proceeded to go to the living room behind her to flick on the television, to turn it on his favorite channel for his favorite show, some unmade show on Cartoon Network. Monica didn't look too far. She didn't question Jake about Bonehead for the good majority for the night, up until it was time for Jake to go to bed. Then, it became a too real of a topic. "Jake, you brushing your teeth?" Aunt Monica yelling from down the hallway, the small narrow hallway that was connected between hers and Lucky's room, to the bathroom that was at the very start of the hallway, of hence Jake was currently at, as he just bathed, and now was in the process of brushing his pearly whites. "Yes, Aunt Money I am. Bonehead's here with me, doing as well." Monica Basil's blood ran cold of fear, as she was already multitasking with thoughts of her medical history and matching up the worst mind condition that matched Jake's to the T. She tried to be calm and relaxed, as again dealing with a child in this type of drama could make the problem worse. So, she answered back cheerfully, "Yeah? Is all Boney showing you the right way? Side to side, right? Yeah, kind of like slitting a neck open. It's easy." "What?" Aunt Monica then turned into her mom mode, despite the fact that the child she was caring for was her nephew. She floated down that hallway, quick, reaching around the corner at the young boy, snatching him right up tightly and scolding him loudly. "Jake Crate, what did you just say?" "Wah." Jake whimpered in fear, still didn't stop from Aunt Money from still disciplining him, as she boomed again. "Jake, where on earth did you hear that awful thing?" Jake's eyes wide, with a slow tear roll, rolling down both sides of his young face. A side effect, I am sure, from any child in that predictive action. Plus to add, I am sure her death grip, with her long, sharp talons of fingernails, didn't help a soul, as she was digging into a bit of his young flesh. Jake was starting to whimper again, but kept his lips silent as he chose not to answer his concerned aunt. So she boomed once more, with a hard shake. "Jake, so help me God, I'll—" "Bonehead!" he screamed through the tears and pressure of the painful fingernails, as well as to account for the situation at hand. An 8-year-old will crack under that any time. Monica, realizing her anger and realizing what she's doing, quickly released her hold and hugged her wailing nephew to her as tight as she could. Trying her best to soothe him, she quickly tried to apologize for her angry outburst with a valued lesson about how wrong that was for Jake to say. "Snake, I am sorry, but you can't say such vile things like that. It's not right." Bonehead said, though it's okay to say. "Really? Why? I thought Boney was your best friend." "He is." "Oh yeah, well Bub tell Boney how wrong he really was then, for telling my nephew how easy something was, like taking a life." In that moment, Jake's eyes opened slowly, and he froze up. Aunt Monica was confused at this newer antic she didn't expect to encounter. "What's going on, Jake?" Jake turned around slowly, away from her. He didn't turn around too drastically, as he stopped to his slight left, which was the side that was directly by his aunt and himself. He was looking directly upward, say a close at 6 foot, from herself and Jake's mutual position. Monica looked on in silence. Jake, too, attempted to join her. In separate views, Monica was staring, as Jake was observing the imaginary beast gritting and seething with anger, at least from Monica's mind, as she noticed him flinching and closing his eyes, here and there. Monica realized now perhaps this could be a time to deploy another med school tactic. She started to whisper a calming and motivating speech into Jake's ear. You know, Jake, I know the world's pretty scary, and I know how that can be a lot for a young boy to go through. So I suppose it's okay to rely upon a monster to fill you up with confidence to take on the world. But, Jake, the moment when a partner turns on their other partner in a tag match, what normally happens? They lose, Jake said in a low tone of fear. Monica smirked a little, as it seemed as though her tactic was working, as she delivered the final line, allowing Jake to do the rest. Precisely. Good job, Uncle Lucky. Would be proud about how strong you really are. Jake then snapped his head toward her direction, with his eyes fully opened and jaw was on the floor. It was in that split second Jake took a rapid trip down memory lane of the eons and eons of old school wrestling tapes that Uncle Lucky and himself would watch. Seeing the play-by-play from the color commentators of the slideshow, what happened during all of the tag team matches, Jake became suddenly self-aware of this knowledge and strength and a newer love of professional wrestling. He smiled cheerfully at his aunt. He then looked back at the empty space in front of him with a scowl of his own. Monica looked on at awe as she was watching this major confrontation go down. I don't need you anymore, bonehead. No, no, no. I need a new tag team partner. No, I don't care. Monica started to clap in excitement. You are not allowed here anymore. Go. As from the final word of the one-sided argument to this scary blank space, a sudden disturbance happened within her house. As Monica felt a intense flutter of cold wind rushing past her, then through her house knocking a few things over, then lastly, swinging open the front door, Jake and Monica quickly ran from the bathroom to the front door to notice the commotion. Both kinfolk were stunned, except for Jake, smiled with his hands on his hips, staring up to Aunt Monica, who looked down, her mind going again. Another 100 magnificent. He wasn't happy, but I sent him back there. You sent him back to that prison place? Monica asked. Jake smiled, as he simply nodded to her question. Monica nodded back, but slower as the what if she was pondering earlier seems more than likely. The supernatural facts now cannot be ignored, as Monica started to fade a bit from her nerves. She was still strong enough, though, before total shutdown to tuck in her nephew, placing a brave smile on her face, telling him how proud of him she was. Yes, Aunt Money, I know, Uncle Lucky is too. The proud comment that allowed her to recoup in silence out in the living room now, as all she did was watch the front door replaying the recent events, the type of events that kind of regressed her mentally to her own childhood days between her and Carol, to then, before, when she was the only one. She started to remember the corny upbringing that every young and blossoming girl goes through emotionally to become a woman. The secrets, the friendships, the diaries, and yes, the many times of sharing the juicy gossip. The one thing that had halted her recollection was the seldom memory when she was in 4th grade. As she remembered, that was the day she killed her own imaginary friend. She thought she understood that it was only that imaginary, so it wouldn't hurt it. But she herself did the exact same thing as Jake did tonight. She felt regrettably guilty, as a talking Clifford-style dog that only wanted to be her best friend was sent to the same place that now Bonehead returned to. Her normal state of mind started to fade as she started to recall the many hours she would do reading about the supernatural and the sneaky R-rated movies she would watch at the local theaters. With her best friends and boyfriends growing up, Monica's mind adapted to the acceptance of the unknown. It was around 12th hours, midnight, when a knock came at the door. Monica sprung back to life as she fell into a depressionary style of sleep from the strange events. She quickly ran to her front door that was still in her point of view. As she acknowledged the late-night visitor, "Who is it?" she asked loudly, assuming it could be a late-night burglar of some kind. "It's the police, ma'am." The loud male voices made it more believable, as Monica's stomach dropped as she opened the front door rather quickly. As the door opened, giving visual aid into the night, her whole house lit up in a light show of some kind of red and blue. 2 strapping cops were there, in full uniform, with their retrospective caps in their hands, showing a visual sign of respect to the civilian they were intruding upon. Monica looked shocked and worried at the same time. "Monica Bassel?" the officer on the left asked. "Yes," she replied. "Are you Monica Bassel, the mother of one Roland Bassel?" the officer of the right asked. Monica's heart started to race rapidly. "Yes, I am." She was preparing herself for the next thing, which normally always entailed the long laundry list of things her son has done, and the ramifications and such to go along with it. Not this time, though, sadly, as the officer from the left delivered the devastating news. Roland was involved in a horrible car accident hours ago, a car accident that sent him right into a coma, as he was held up by a ventilator. His chest had permanently caved in. He was barely alive. Monica collapsed from the news. Both officers rushed to her aid, walking her back to the closet chair nearest the door. They came in and closed the door out of decency. Monica had no choice in the matter, as the big motherly piece propelled her to go and join her son at his bedside, until a loud stir from Lucky's room brought young Jake down the hall, half asleep, to see what the occurrence was. The left officer smiled and soothed him back into his bedroom to talk with him. Monica's stomach turned to a sea of knots. The end game. She didn't waste a lot of thought as she made a plea to the officers to stay her and watch her nephew for a mere 20 minutes as she runs there and checks on Roland. They agreed, only if there was a potential substitute on the way within 10. Monica didn't sweat the small stuff as she jumped in her truck and sped off. Her motherly instincts were all aflare. As she had lost her husband recently, her nephew was potentially involved with a demonic spirit. And now her youngest son is on life support, all within weeks of one and other. She was losing her mental strength. The initial travel to the hospital would take longer, but in the dead of night with minimal traffic, Monica made it there, running to Roland's room, emotionally gone, emotionally unstable. She went silent. She fell into a certain trance of thought and being coherent within the time frame she had given herself. Time seemed to go slower the longer she stayed, but much to her dismay, she forgot to phone Arnold or Diane to go to the house to relieve the police, as the 20 minutes turned into a crazy 1 hour. She quickly dialed Arnold's number and woke him and his wife up from a dead sleep. Arnold didn't question much, as he never did. He was a good, obedient eldest son, a patriot, a true blue-collar worker. It would only take Arnold to get to the family home in 5 minutes. Monica was relived and embarrassed all at once, as she settled back into the funk she was in, staring at her youngest with all the scars and bandages under and over his brow, the long translucent tubes that was going in and out his mouth. She was ushering in scars on her mind, every passing moment, assured that everything that was crazy had now settled down. Suddenly, Roland's room phone started to ring. Monica jumped up quick to answer, figuring it was Diana or Carol, perhaps even a doctor. She picked up the phone quickly. "Hello, Mom? Arnold?" It was a mere 15 minutes since the last time she had spoke to her oldest. 2. Send him over to be the babysitter till morning, allowing the volunteers to leave and continue to serve and protect. Monica had no idea the storm she had. It didn't pass. She was just passing through the eye of it. Mom, I don't know what the hell is going on, but these cops are dead. Their necks are slit open and their guns are missing. Oh my God, where is Jake? Is Jake okay? He's not here either. Mom, good God, what is going on? Monica then hangs up quickly on Arnold. She wasn't worried in his regards, as his elder sense of the world was already too experienced, too much of which Monica didn't like herself. Nevertheless, she rushed out into the hospital hall, running to the nurse's desk to seek help. She found no one. She was confused. She looked down the hall once more, searching for any source of humanity, but saw nothing, heard nothing. She didn't understand what was transpiring all around her, as the hospital rooms around her was filled with other patents, with the exception of no staff, except a sudden dragging sound came whirling behind one of the closed doors. Monica saw him in his dark blue uniform, the late-night cleaner, pushing his yellow mop bucket. Monica didn't separate the difference from staff as she ran to him quickly to try and seek help. She almost tackled the old man, explaining to him her situation. The old man was completely dumbfounded by the sudden situation, however rising to the accusation, as he himself has noticed the anomaly. Hold on, Missy. I am going to go check the ER. Something could be happening down there that you and I don't know about. Monica agreed, as the old man placed his mop bucket to the nearest wall and took off. As he disappeared into the same door, he entered, leaving Monica alone all over again. She started to think about our nephew and the strange things that occurred involving this bonehead. She thought about Lucky as well in regards to her nephew, trying to regain the proper strength again to take on this newer endeavor. Monica's whole world was cracking beneath her very feet like thin ice. She walked back slowly to the nurse's station, being welcomed by the familiar sounds of EKG machines and other medical machines giving those whirling noises. It brought stillness to her as she waited. She gazed up and down the long hallways, listened to her past memories as an army nurse and the tent she operated out of. She began to think about all of the lives she saved, and her inner pride roaring out from within from the relief each man or woman felt as Monica would give them the comforting news. Monica started to resurface those feelings, honing in on her inner peace. At least 15 minutes had passed when a loud crackle was heard, a crackle that sounded like a gunshot. Monica jumped. She followed the noise to the source of the emergency room doors. She peeked through the slits of glass. She was startled beyond belief at the scene she was witnessing, as dead, in the middle of a graphic scene, stood little Jake, the snake crate, with 2 Black Beretta police issued pistols firing into the crowd of bystanders and staff alike, killing all coldly and without mercy. His hands and grip steadfast. His little hands shouted a pro-marksman, similar to the fabled Wild West gunslinger, outlaw Jesse James, as the kickback from each pistol didn't faze him. In fact, in his blood-soaked PJs, he donned a smirking face of excitement of the blood and gore he was delivering each time he fired the weapons. Something, though, that wasn't expected, though, was Jake's eyes. His eyes was the truth behind who was really doing these acts. The eyes that shined like a light ocean, aqua blue, not his normal chocolate brown. This wasn't Jake Crate. It was something different. Monica was looking on in horror, contemplating about possibly helping the wounded out there, or running to the nearest phone. A loud, thunderous, monotoned laugh escaped young Jake's lips, sending fear like an injection up Monica's spine. A laugh that Jake shouldn't have. A laugh that was evil and demonic sounding. It was a laugh of darkness. Monica's mind went blank as she focused again out into the ER, noticing the lives that ran from him lied still, soaked in their own fluids, holes from the many bullets that was fired, donning the last faces given at the moment of their death. She gazed into the eyes of the now slightly contorted face of her young nephew, his warm peachy-colored complexion now a Casper white, his plump, happy face now in the shape of a hound's, his mouth donning a little bit of a snout. He was laughing loudly in the same pitch as he did a moment ago, deep and demonic. He tossed his empty pistols down into the sea of dead flesh that surrounded him. As Monica watched him scope the land, unsheathing a decent Bowie knife from behind his back that seemed to be a small sword. Monica knew why and who that was. Bonehead, she whispered to herself as she hunched over from the window's point of view, going back to Roland's room, trying to figure what to do next. Unaware of her instincts, she starts to fill in on the supernatural backstory as she plans her defense out. Bonehead must be some demonic spirit that got Jake and now wants to kill me and Roland. Why? A sudden loud noise was heard. The large separation doors that was to the emergency room busted down. Monica silenced her words, as trying to figure out how to survive this demonic attack. Damn those movies and books. Why did they have to be so right? Quivering in fear, looking all around for a suitable weapon to use against this demonic nephew of hers. She didn't know what to do. She didn't know no magic words to speak, no way of spewing any religious words of expelling this demon back to whence it came, or a silver bullet. What she did own was a strong heart, which gave her a strong will, a proud motherly instinct, and a very nice broken broom handle. She made into a baton of sorts as she awaited for her demonic nephew to reach Roland's room. She was a broken-minded woman, unable the last few weeks to rebuild her own mind from the loss of her husband, shattered beyond belief, hoping and praying to find herself out of the grieving process till Jake the Snake was dropped in her lap from the numerous problems he had. Never in her wildest dreams would she ever consider here and now doing battle with her same nephew over the very life of her own son. Right behind her, of where she stood, she had no fear. Loud sneaker-like scuffles was heard as the monotoned laughter intensified to now being a mere earshot from the room. Monica gripped tighter upon the broken broom handle. She didn't want to. Every fiber in her being was against the idea of having to swing violently at her 8-year-old nephew. She thought about his angelic nature, his kind demeanor, the complex view of he and hers personal relationship. She became defiant in her stance in the present circumstance. She started to loosen her grip, lowering her weapon, despite the pending danger rapidly approaching. Tears of stress and duress became apparent as she felt beaten of the pre-verbal fact of here and now, when the title of mother should have gave her all the motivation to do what she had to, beaten to her individuality of who she was as a person, strong and defiant since she was little, a proud example for little Carol to follow as an idol, not to mention her outstanding service record as an army nurse, now mere rags, mere rubble. She has as anchors as she almost is now, assuming the white flag position, on her knees, crying hysterically, discouraged beyond words in this battle of good versus evil. The sneaker scuffles had gotten a lot closer in meeting their desired destination, heavy and drawn out like. Monica looked and awaited the possessed executioner. She awaited the evil that took over her Jake the snake to come take her. She tried to close her eyes and accept the outcome before it happens. On the ground next to her comatose son, Arnold and Diane both were okay. Carol had Frank. Her mental checklist started to sound better as she said the names out loud. She tried to put her mind somewhere peaceful, into the means to always stay, to forget the life she had grown and molded for almost a whole 4 eras of the current affairs. She was almost at peace, until from outside in the hall, Arnold came bursting through the outer doors, opposite the direction of the serial killer. "Jake!" Arnold boomed. Monica stayed on the floor, brought back to reality, as she scooted to the door, surveying the newer battle that was to commence. Arnold approached Jake with arms outstretched and ready to go, in a fighting style of sense. Jake cackled, standing in place. My, little Arnold Basel, you have gotten real tasty. Your soul's going to be a lot harder to digest than this little one's." The demon spurt from within the 8-year-old spoke, giving a frightening outcome to Monica's ears of one Jake Crate, the evil entity that he thought he had banished back to that dark place, only drove it away momentarily, thus coming back and taking revenge at the right time when a strong-willed person such as Monica would be away from the house. Monica teared up again, observing the facial outlook of the demonic child now up close and personal. She looked back at her eldest, wondering what he will do to save the day. "Listen, Jake, I know you're in there, okay? You got to fight, 'cause I don't know what in the hell is going on. But I know one thing right now. You're not gonna make it to Roland." "Oh, really? You really think that a bleeding heart like yours will really stop me, boy?" Arnold started to show a tad inch of fear, as the tone of the reply of the demonic presence within Jake implied greater purposes of pain that Arnold failed to realize. As with a loud growl from inside of Jake, Jake stared back at his eldest cousin and started to impersonate his dead father, Jake's Uncle Lucky. You remember Arnold? To choke that bat. Stop crying, it's only a game. Arnold's eyes widened to hear his father's voice from the young-cut lips of Jake's, on recounting a troubled childhood memory that haunted Arnold. So, Arnold didn't think twice in his emotional response, as he withdrew his pistol tucked in behind him, nestled in from his shorts he was wearing. Monica sprung up from her hidden seclusion from Roland's room. She stood in between her son and nephew. "Mom, move." "No." "Mom, move now." "No, Arnold. No. This is still your cousin." Arnold's eyes widened again, as he himself found himself in a crazy predicament. But the longer in those nanoseconds he gazed into her sorrow-filled eyes, the more he understood that he couldn't do what he wanted to do. He lowered his weapon. Monica smiled and nodded and mouthed the words, "Thank you," until Jake chimed in again, in a worser way, then none, breaking up the mother and son moment, as while he was submerged by Monica's body size. Jake had used some of the demonic speed and got behind Arnold and the better advantage point in the long stem of things, still with the knife in hand, still bloodlusting. As the moment Arnold lowered his weapon, Jake raised his blade up and brought it down hard upon the opened wrist of Arnold's, making a loud thud sound, a thudding sound that was similar to a grape popping loudly. Monica jumped to her eldest son's attack, as did the now injured hero that now needed saving. He dropped his weapon, raising his other hand to the wound to try and halt the intense bleeding, before Jake raised his arm again once more and delivered another puncture style of stab to Arnold's ribcage. As Arnold tried to combat him, Jake was starting to easily overcome him from the injuries sustained, but Arnold, with his body weight, was doing his best to use that to his advantage. Monica was frozen in fear, unaware, nor unable to lend a helping hand of reaching a calm verdict. She watched on in fear as Jake and his demonic laughter was heard as Arnold tried to throw him around, and Jake was delivering kicks and more attempted slashes. Arnold, sensing his pre-verbal end, he lets out a cry of support to his mother. "Mom, the gun, the gun, get the gun." Monica looked around as she understood her son. To retrieve the gun and gain his leverage back. She felt dumb, as in the midst of their tussle, she didn't pay attention to the location of the weapon landed, as she was too preoccupied with the severity of the situation. She took a step and felt the gun graze her toes as it slid a foot in front of her. Closer to the fight as well, she lunged forward to try and retrieve the small snub-nosed revolver. She was met, however, by an eager and victorious Jake, who had the bloodied blade to Arnold's neck, staring at Monica. Monica was frozen, staring into both sets of eyes, understanding and feeling both predicaments. "Get the gun, Monica. It's time to play a game of target practice." The demonic voice ordered the failed aunt, who obeyed swiftly as she snatched the tiny revolver up and pointed it at Jake's face. "Good, good, sister. Now I simply want you to cock back the hammer there." Monica, confused, only for a moment remembered some of her husband's Wild West movies. Remembering the pistol, she had resembled the little brother version of those same weapons. Click. A loud sound was heard, giving the acknowledgement of the deadly decision-making and its consequences. She obeyed once more, staring down the iron sight of the foe within Jake. The demon cackled more as he delivered the final, climatic choice that brought all of them together, there and now. "Okay, sister, you're ready. You have to make one decision, and one alone. Who lives and who dies? Me, or your precious firstborn here?" "What?" Monica spat out nervously. Jake looked at her again. "Yeah, it's a game. One of us stays, and the other must go." "Go where?" Monica asked nervously, interrupting the evil one. "You already know, sweets." The demonic voice chilled out the more obvious that should have been realized from the start of this crazy circumstance. This ghost must have been sent to that place of unknown origin, of darkness and wetness. Originally, he must have made a deal to exchange someone, himself, for them. He must have made it personal, for going after one of Lucky's boys. Monica gritted her teeth in disgust and torment of what she was currently struggling with, staring at the disgusting features of the culprit of the young Jake, then to the hostage of her eldest son. "Why are you doing this?" Monica begged as she began to plead with the entity, the ghost that was in control, her enemy to this horrible condition. Bonehead tilted his head in disbelief into what he was hearing from the pre-verbal hero of the story that was unfolding. He didn't loosen up his hold on the downed Basil, as he still had his blade to his Adam's apple, quite snugly. "Oh, Monica, you going to try and beg me? Try and reason with a man that only wants life, not death anymore?" Bonehead boomed with anger as he jostled the blade only an inch. Arnold winced in pain, making Monica falter that much more. But she still was all be to control her firearm. Bonehead laughs for a moment again. The statement made was immediately felt from Monica's mind, realizing her frightful mistake. "Never reason with a demon. Man, you damn woman. Man." Bonehead corrected her terminology error. Monica faltered again, but stopped as she realized a weakness. A weakness displayed that she can manipulate and extort, and answer that could save Arnold and Roland as well as herself in this present time. She seized it. "So you are a man?" "Yes, woman." "Well, how the hell did you get like this?" Her somewhat blunt answer confused the ghost, as he literally tilted his head and gazed into the woman's eyes, trying to figure out her game, if it was sincere or, quite literally, a rouse. She still had the weapon pointed at the two bodies, but lowered it enough to establish a heavier eye contact with the knife fighter. "How did a solider like you were, so decorated as Jake told me you were, be sentenced to a spiritual-induced solitary confinement?" Monica's spiritual side was seeping through, a strong focal point of her character, something that seemed to be leading her and this evil ghost further down the rabbit hole. Bonehead looked at her now with full sincere look, almost friendly, as he himself was recalling something from a troubled past, silent but busy. Monica watched her son from her privia viso, searching with his free hand was for any sort of weapon or item to bash or kill. Monica found the kryptonite to the beast. "I have no clue, woman. I have no clue. One day on the field. The next moment, I am under it, getting pulled in by this tar-like substance. A hell. No heaven. Screams and time are one of the same. Endless and everlasting." Monica looked more scared of this fictional place. That now seemed more real, staring down the byproduct of one essential product. She wasn't afraid, not one bit overall. As she asked again, watching the scooting Arnold place his arm nearest the door he was by. It looked as though, from Monica's perspective, he may have found the perfect candidate, focusing on his disappearing arms. "Well, I am sorry, Bonehead. No warrior such as you really deserved this eternity. Do you believe that, woman?" A sense of sincerity was heard through the deep monotone demonic voice, as still the look of appreciation was blasted all over the monster's face. Monica sensed the conclusion was near, as Arnold came back from the door sporting a doctor's hammer, the type of hammer they used to check for reflexes. It was shaped as a small metallic tomahawk. Arnold had it gripped tight in his left hand, as he now was inching himself closer again to the distracted perpetrator. Monica still kept showcasing her impressive acting as she gave into the facade of Bonehead's wounded warrior tale of woe. "I do, my friend. I do. Just like my Lucky. I believe there are people that have been chosen by God to be the people that we just can't be. No matter how, or how long a lot of us can't be in those situations. A lot of us are not selected to be heroes. But, you know something, Bonehead? What I have learned about people like you?" "What's that, woman?" Bonehead readjusts his clench upon his knife, readying for the preemptive strike, slightly unaware of the pending onslaught mere seconds away. Monica walked closer to keep the suspicion down to a minimal, as now Arnold was there. Mom Monica looked deep into the beast's eyes, full of fiery hate, darkness beyond measure. She knew what was about to occur. She realized the peace that she would have to make from it. She mutters her final line. There's always going to be heroes, but what about saviors? Arnold brings down the full force of his strength, down hard, with that hammer on the lower back of the young child. From the coo of the byline that was just spoken, instantly by the surprise of it, the monster felt the blow. His eyes closed, and an intense reaction happened. In instinct, he turned around abnormally fast to end the former hostage with a violent blow. Monica had other plans as with her free hand, mid-momentum, snatched his arm and redirected the black over to her direction and allowed the blade to enter into her liver with a thunderous thump and suction sound. Arnold screamed out in pain as he saw what had just happened. Monica, with blood now starting to exit from her lips, looked down again into her old nephew's young eyes, understanding of the peace she had to make now, the same peace that allowed her to follow through with such endeavor. Hey, Snake, I know you might not be in there, but I just wanted to tell you that Uncle Lucky, was always right about you. I love you. The demon simply chuckled in disbelief. He then tries to unsheathe his long blade from the belly of the dying ant. He couldn't, as the ant had a death lock upon the very handle that remained outward. Her peace was made. She was okay. She raised the pistol she still had in her other hand. The demon tried to leave, as his flight response was activated, but was stuck by his hand that was covered by Monica's, both around the handle of the knife. Monica closed her eyes as the cold sweat started to cover her face. Her body temperature was finally going through its shutdown mode. He placed her mind somewhere, as she allowed only her gun hand the remainder of movement for entire body. Bam, bam, bam. Bonehead was done. The demon that took over an 8-year-old's body just to get back to the Basel family was defeated, at a great cost, as the sound effects that echoed down the long halls gave a bad FX to the scene of falling bodies of the young Jake Crate and one Monica Basel, Arnold Basel, who was still on the ground. The firstborn of the Basel clan of Monica and Lucky Basel just witnessed his mother's sacrificial effort of saving her sons. He gathered strength that was left, and with the intense pain that came along with it, Arnold ran to his mother's body and wrapped his arms around her tight, holding her and rocking back and forth as though he regressed to a newborn stage again, trying to soothe his emotions, praying and hoping what he just saw. What had just transpired didn't happen. His cousin dead, his mother dead. He held her tighter with intense tears streaming. He pulled her away from his chest to gaze upon her, hoping she'll just wake up one more time, but instead just began to look upon the closed, peaceful eyes. The pale flesh that was once warm and comforting, now an icy winter feel. Her lips that matched the summer sun, now metamorphizing into the icy stage as well, with the added look of the dried blood from the corners of her lips, now done streaming as the organs that was fueling them have ceased altogether. Mom, Arnold said in a low groan, I am not going to know what to do. Arnold's inner truth started to be shared in the midst of this mourning he was enduring as he held her corpse there, so near and dear to him. He had a failed memory of he and her. He had to vent his regret of it. The cold, bloodied tile floor beneath all three persons now had the same temperature as the environment. Cold and quiet were also the best descriptive terms to be said in this final picture. The big ending effect of when the blended matchup of good versus evil always commences. The collateral damage is always chaos. No happy ending. No significant tears of respect shared. As any individual that would share Arnold's current place would agree. The weight of this burden he must carry in his memories will have to be the most grueling thing he will ever do. Arnold, still staring into the closed eyes of his mother, started to realize more and more from the consequences that happened, the ripple effect this may cause he and the rest of the Basel family. He started to panic a tad. As he moved an inch to try and stand his injuries, brought him back to earth. He cried in pain. He knew he was helpless. He was emotionally a stone. He was alone. Enduring such feeling is like the slow murder of one's soul, I suppose, as to quote Monica Basil and her ideals of God picking certain people to be our warriors and other people, like her, to be the saviors by looking at Roland and Arnold. Both represent one and the other, Arnold being the obvious. As he sat there, though, despite his emotional motivation as to awaiting potential help from local law and enforcement, he received help, as from the corner of his eyes, nearest his mother's body, he saw a non-bright small light ascend from her chest, as another similar light appeared at the top of the room. Arnold was as stone as he saw that light from his mother's chest float upwards and into the light on the ceiling and disappear. The tale of the warrior and the savior can now officially begin. Arnold sat in silence as finally the police arrive. The end.